Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the DVC Show. Coming up, we're going to give our opinions on the worst DVC policies. Hey, folks, and welcome. Coming to you from the Bob Varley Studio in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Pete Werner, joined this week in the studio by my good friends, co-owner and realtor of movingtoorlando.com, Mr. Sean Falk.
Hi.
Our producer, Mr. Corey Fiasconaro.
Welcome home.
And joining us via the interwebs, senior editor of DVCFan.com, Mr. Paul Krieger.
Hey, everybody.
And the brand ambassador of DVC Rental Store, Ms. Kerri McPherson.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here.
And, of course, sales and marketing director for DVCResaleMarket.com, Miss Marissa Valentin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Kerri.
Great to see you.
You're much prettier than Derek. Just want to say that. And welcome to you folks. Hope this will be a good week for you. I usually say I hope your week is off to a good start, but this is a Monday show. So just sending out good wishes that your week goes well. Just a reminder, our shows are brought to you by the World of DVC, which includes DVCResaleMarket.com if you're in the market for a DVC resale, hence the name. DVCRentalStore.com if you are looking to rent out your points, or if you're looking to experience DVC before you take the plunge and want to rent out some points and take a vacation, try it out. DVCRentalStore.com, great place to go. And of course, MoneraFinancial.com, and the great resource that I have utilized a number of times actually to finance your DVC resale purchase. So links to all of that in the show notes right below this. And while you're in the show notes and fussing around down there, go ahead and hit that like button. Give us a thumbs up. Helps us out a lot with YouTube. And of course, if you're not subscribed to our channel, hit that subscribe button so you can get and the bell so that you can get notified every time we put up a new show, and every time Fiasco goes out and does one of his great room tours. He's been prolific in putting those up. Lately, he's been hitting all the grand villas on Walt Disney World property.
That's right. And you know what? I love these shows when I just get showered with compliments. I think I'll put together a little segment where I loop in all Pete's compliments over the past few months here on the DVC show, because they turn out to be great shows.
Only if you also put together a compilation of all the times I've come after you.
You know what? I'll do both. You'll find them on Patreon.
And you will see how bipolar I really am. Okay? I just sent a text to my team jokingly, kind of, that I was a vindictive old queen with emotional issues, and they should bear that in mind when they say things to me. And Fiasco can put together a whole video to prove that. Well, welcome, folks. Welcome. So we want to talk about the worst DVC policies, and let's be honest. We're all going to talk about one in particular that I think we all agree on. One of the worst policies they've ever done, a couple of years ago, when they instituted resale restrictions.
Yep.
And they decided to create a class system within DVC. And for no other reason than DVC was stupid in not embracing the resale market. And guys like Nick Cotton did a great job in creating a market for DVC resales. And rather than Disney adapting to that and embracing it, as they should have, They decided to go the other direction. And I think we've seen a lot of decisions, especially in the last year, from DVC that have demonstrated, well, I mean, honestly, if I'm going to be really honest, their communication in March, April, and May of last year with DVC members and the changes as a result, and the things that we were dealing with as a result of the pandemic, didn't just show bad policy decisions, it showed incompetence. And, I'm on record as having said that multiple times. I'm not going to go into it again, but for me, the worst policy right now are those resale restrictions. And they obviously they doubled down on it with Riviera, saying that, if you resold Riviera, that the person buying it, they could only use those points at Riviera. They couldn't use them anywhere else.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen whether they're going to continue on with that policy. Unfortunately, I think they're going to. But let's open it up. Kerri, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with you, first of all, about Riviera. That was a tough decision and a tough thing to hear. I'm going to go the complete opposite way, though, and go into the resorts, because as a member, as a resort guest, I always love to have housekeeping service. And I think one of the things that I wish that they would sort of loosen a little bit is the housekeeping, to have it daily instead of every 4 or 7 nights, depending on the stay. I like to come back from the park and have the bed made and the fresh towels and everything just kind of put together. You don't want to do that on vacation.
Would you be willing? Would you be okay with your dues going up significantly?
That's
in order for that to happen? Yeah,
it's a great question. I would. I personally would. I've heard from other people who say that too, and I know that that's a touchy subject. Probably 50-50 of people say, "Don't raise my dues. I'm fine the way that my room is." That's just my personal opinion, but that's what I always think that with the policies of. I like the service of that, the trash and towel service.
Like if you were to go and book, let's say they didn't add it to the dues, but let's say you were going to go book. And I know that they have a price for it, but you have to do some investigation and asking. But imagine if you booked online and it said, do you want to pay an extra $50 for your stay to cover housekeeping? Mm-hmm. That would be like a great in-between where I would be like, yes, please.
That's a good solution.
That's a very good solution, actually.
Yeah.
That's a very good solution.
Right.
Because I would absolutely do it every time. I'm with you. I like that. I like coming back to a room that's been cleaned and the bed's been made. And that always feels nice, right? That always feels nice. I agree with you on that. Yeah. So, all right. So, Marissa, what about you?
So I totally agree with you on the restrictions. I think that was probably the biggest policy change that affected DVC purchasers overall and DVC value. And it sets kind of a future decision of how is this going moving forward. What I think is sad now, we're seeing on the resale side of people who bought at such a premium and now they're trying to figure out how do I resell and get some of that value back if I own it Riviera, not realizing what type of purchase they bought into and how restricted it is to sell. But the same thing we have members that are trying to add on and they bought directly from Riviera and they go, hey, I want to add on other places. And now this is where it starts to get really tricky. I had a guest last night that said, we've got 100 points at Riviera. We want to buy 100 points at Polynesian, but they didn't realize they could never use their 200 points together at Riviera. So I think it just makes the whole thing just tricky. I don't know if it brought any more value to direct. We saw a huge surge in the resale market. So I think it actually brought more attention to resale. I think they mistakenly kind of pulled the plug and were like, by the way, there's a huge resale market. Yeah. So I don't think it did them any favors. So I think that's a big one. Not me personally, but I think where we get a lot of guest feedback from is the reallocation on the point chart. And I think it's because they don't properly disclose where all the reallocation details come from or as much of the transparency of the total points. So I think that's another one that people get very hung up on.
And I'm not going to put you guys in a position to comment on this because I know some of you were previously guides for DVC, and you have many friends that are guides for DVC. But one of the things for me with those resale restrictions was, and I want to choose my words carefully here, was the lack of transparency on the part of direct guides in explaining to people what they were getting into, that they were not going to be able, that the resale value of their contract was going to be affected by this policy. And it seemed like they put this policy in place and then were very opaque as opposed to transparent with people. And if you have to, if you're Disney and you have to institute a policy that requires you to be opaque about the details of it in conducting your business, then you've probably made a bad policy decision. And you certainly didn't make a policy decision that was in the best interest of the membership, which is what your job is, by the way. And, you know, everybody talks about, are the resale restrictions ever going to go away? I mean, certainly I hope so, but I'll be honest, I'm not seeing any indication from anything DVC has been doing or saying lately that would lead me to believe that's the case. But Fiasco?
Yeah, so for me, the resale restriction is definitely the top of my list. When I was originally considering buying DVC, and Riviera was, up and coming, that was a definite contender for me wanting to own at Riviera. That resale restriction made it a hard nope, But on top of that, now I'm not well versed in all the legalities and how this works, and I know that there are limitations, serious limitations on what they would be able to do, but it really makes me feel bad to see the people who were not able to travel this past year and to just be in a position where their points would just expire. That sucks. And to also piggyback back to the resale restriction, them kind of giving a strong arm to resale with Riviera. When it comes to these people who have points that are going to expire, resale is the only saving grace for them to rent out their points. And DVC's over here really not doing anything for those members, and really their only hope is resale. And at the same time, they have these restrictions on there, which just feels doubly bad. Again, I know there's contract legal things that go into why these points are going to expire. I just wish I heard more stories about DVC themselves reaching out and helping these members with their expiring points out, because it really does bum me out. It does bum me out a lot to see people not be able to use their DVC.
Let me ask, Kelly, Marissa, are you surprised at the price point right now for Riviera resales?
I'm even more surprised at Alani, but yes, Riviera. Sorry, I thought you meant direct.
No, I'm talking about on the resale market. On the resale market, because that was one of the big things before Riviera went on sale, or right after it went on sale, before it opened. Was how are those restrictions going to affect its sales?
Right.
And what kind of numbers were we going to see when these contracts started showing up on being sold on resale? So right now I'm on DVCResaleMarket.com. I'm taking a look at Riviera listings, and I'm seeing 140, 145, 150. One contract that got accepted, 129 for 300 points. And the reason I'm bringing this up is the resort is a little over a year old. This is a brand new DVC resort. like you guys do this for a living, right? So that's why I'm asking. Are you surprised by these prices? Do you think they should be more? Do you think they're priced right for a new DVC resort without restrictions? Or, what's your take on it?
So where we're seeing actual sales end up, and we've had about 5 sales just in this last couple of days. So it's given us a better feel because it's kind of been a slow buildup for Riviera. But we're seeing it at an end around like the 130s, mid to high 130s, which I think is kind of what we expected. And whenever a resort is in the first 1 to probably 4 years of being originally sold by Disney is probably when it's going to recognize its lowest price on resale. It really doesn't recognize its true value until a couple years after sellout.
Okay.
So if you go back into the last probably 12 months of Polynesian sales, we're really starting to see Polynesian recognize its true value. And it's gone from mid 130s to now mid 160s in the last year. So I think Riviera's got a ways to go until we see full value. So I think selling in the 130s is an extremely healthy price based on what restrictions it has.
And they are selling. I'm sitting here looking at the time of this recording, obviously. There's a total of 7 Riviera listings on DVC resale market site. 2 of them are sale pending. 3 of them are offer accepted. So they're selling. People are buying these, right?
So yeah, I think on the flip side, what Disney does so well is create an atmosphere, and they did that really, really well with Riviera. The ambiance, the feel of the rooms, the location, the Skyliner, all of that are going to be huge plus points for Riviera. So I think they did such a good job of that regardless of the restrictions, we are still seeing a really good demand for that resort.
So then it's not out of line to say that Disney's attempt to harm the resale market with these restrictions have certainly not affected people buying Riviera resale knowing the restrictions because they like the resort and they're happy to buy these contracts at these prices knowing that they're only going to be able to use them there. I mean, so did this kind of backfire on Disney?
I think so. I mean, they might have taken the value down, but I think it also made people pause about buying direct to begin with. So if you say, okay, this should probably be selling in the 160s versus on resale. So we might be taking a bit of a hit on what we could sell for, but I think they're taking a bit of a hit on people going, do we buy Riviera where it might be a little harder sale on the back end, or do we just buy resale at a cheaper price that we can resell so much easier if it's one of the classic 14?
Okay.
So I don't think that what they did helped them, and I don't think it hurt resale.
Okay. And I don't want to turn the show into, and I'm not hating on Riviera. Every time I talk about this stuff on a show, people think I'm hating on Riviera. I'm not at all.
Yeah, it's awesome. Riviera's great.
The resort is gorgeous, and I completely get direct to resale. Completely get why people would buy there. I've thought about buying there. But I'm talking about the policy. That's it. Not the resort. And certainly nothing but love to anybody who chooses to join DVC. I don't care what path you take. Okay, you're in the club. You're in the family. And so I want to be really clear about that because somewhere along the line, my feelings about this policy have been misinterpreted to mean that I think people who buy at Riviera are stupid. And I don't at all. I completely get why you bought there and that, those restrictions didn't matter to you. And okay, great. I don't think you made a bad choice. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous resort, so I completely get it. So just want to make sure I get that. What about you, Sean? Let's bring you in this conversation. What do you
My problem, well, as far as Riviera goes, my problem with the policy is not so much about not being able to use it at other places. It's what it means for someone who does buy there. Because, like, for me, I own an Alani. I could, and let's say somebody has a resale there, like resale at Riviera, and they're limited just to there. I'm not limited to where I want to go. So if me and everybody else I know wants to book up Riviera for the entire year, we fully have the right to do that, even though we have the first 14 and we don't even own it Riviera. Like, we can do those types of things and book stuff up. But
Well, it's important to mention
if
your
you're
Alani.
limited, yeah.
It's just important to mention your Alani points were purchased directly through
Right,
Disney.
right.
Those were
Mine are
not purchased through resale.
Exactly. So
he can use his points
right.
at Riviera.
And that's what I'm saying is, like, people who did buy direct, I think that people who bought resale at Riviera are very, potentially harmed in that way because they're limited to only using it at one resort. But all throughout the years, everybody else who bought direct points with Disney can also use Riviera. So they're in competition with people like me for those same rooms, but I have 14 choices or 15 choices, they have one. So that's my problem with it, because now those people are essentially, it's not being penalized that they can't go other places, they're penalized in their own home resort. And that's my problem with even like, the Polynesian. They're priced out because they have the standard and they have the bungalows. No one's buying it for the bungalows. Like, they're not. Like, very, very few people are getting points for the bungalows. So the allocation of the points is tons and tons of people all fighting for deluxe studios because they just simply can't afford the bungalows.
Right.
So, and that's my problem with that. But so number one, I think it's not a policy problem, but I think the way it's structured for booking your room heavily favors people who know what they're doing with DVC. It's very against newcomers. And I think that sucks because it makes their experience not as great. And that's to correlate it easier for people who are newcomers like I generally am, I relate it back to FastPass Plus, which I don't like FastPass Plus. I think it heavily favors, I think it's supposed to give people an opportunity, and they tout it as something where we're giving people who've never been to Disney a chance to get to do some of these bigger thrill rides because we let them book in advance. If I've never been to Disney, let's say I've never been to Epcot, never even heard of it, I'm booking my first trip. I can tell you right now, one of the fast passes I'm going for, probably if I have kids, is Finding Nemo. And because my kids might like Finding Nemo. Don't know what Test Track is, I don't know what Soarin' is. Like, those just aren't, they're not Disney movies, they don't translate, and so you miss out on the things you should have been going for, but instead you used fast passes for the wrong things that you didn't need a fast pass for.
Well, just for reference, I built a career on educating people on that stuff. But your point is well taken.
Right. So when they put policies in place, like for me as a generally newcomer into DVC, I don't know anything about walking a reservation. I just sign up one day and I'm told, hey, and you get 11-month window, and then I get there at the 11-month day and I can't book what I was supposed to be able to book because other people were more knowledgeable. Nothing against those people. It's just the policies and the rules and the stuff that's in place heavily cater to those who already know what they're doing and have found the loopholes. Right. So as a newcomer, it's frustrating and it makes me disenfranchised to DVC. And I think that just continues like a downward trend. And my other thing with it, and maybe it's a current issue, I don't know. So like I joined in August of 2019. That was when I got my points. So they gave me my 2018 points. I had a year to use them. And then of course I got new ones in December of 2019 because that's my use year. So I started off strong with some points. 2020 happened. So obviously it was a big struggle to use said points. And I booked several Alani trips that got canceled as I went along. And I had one booked for the very end of November going into December. Of course, the end of November would be when my banked points should expire. But they had reached out and said people who are Alani members, like if that's your home resort and you had a trip that was booked and it was interrupted, they were giving us through the end of February to use our stuff. So I was like, oh, that's perfect. So I tried to book a trip That was the last couple days of November and the first couple days of December. So, but when I went to actually book it, they were like, no, you can't do that because you have to actually wait till November 30th, let your points expire, and then we can re-upload the points. And I was like, right, but I'm trying to plan a trip to Hawaii and I can't wait till the last second. Like, it's just not, especially during the pandemic, it's a situation where you have to have like your stuff prepped with getting COVID tested and all these kinds of things.
Right.
So like you can't do it last second. And so I'm asking them, what can I do? And they're like, you can book it. So their solution to me, and this was their idea, was for me to use my current points to book like November 29th and 30th, and then borrow points to use December 1, 2, 3, 4 area, and then once December 1st hits, they would go back, reverse it, and then reallocate the points back at me, like use the other ones. But then I said, well, what happens if there is nothing available? And they're like, oh, well, then you'd still have till February to use the points. And I'm like, so you think I should borrow, like, to do that? I was like, that's insane. Like, there's no way. I can't believe this is your plan as a thing. This is what you're suggesting to me. But so a lot of people would have been like, okay, we'll just do that. So I ended up just missing that trip entirely because I'm like, it's too risky. There's no way. And they're like, well, when you're in Hawaii, then just call us and we'll just figure it out from there. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to call you in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's how you want to spend your vacation.
Right. So then in January,
what could possibly go wrong?
Right. So then in January, I finally go, and they implemented a policy saying, hey, if you come during these sets of dates, we will give you like your 4th night free or your 5th night free or your 10th night free. Like every 5 nights you get a free night. But of course I get there, they implement the policy the day before is when they release it. I fly to Hawaii, get there, and I'm like, hey, I want to use this. And they're like, oh, you need to call member services. It's 4:00 in the afternoon in Hawaii because that's when you check in. So it's midnight. In Florida, you can't call member services. So I'm like, I just have to check in. And then I spent the next 3 days on phones, and the wait times are like 2 hours on the phone. So I spent a pretty solid like 6 hours of my trip trying to get like a free night out of my thing. And then they were like, well, we'll extend your trip out a night. I'm like, I can't extend my trip a night. I have plane tickets to go home. Like, how am I supposed to extend a day? Like, so I'm like, I wanted a refund for one of the days. So I'm like, I just don't understand what's happening here and why this is such like a fight.
Well,
and
obviously,
a hassle. Like,
and I understand this. I mean, the pandemic, no one saw this coming,
right.
And there was no contingency plan for the world on fire. So I don't criticize them for that per se. The lack of communication. And in many cases, especially with people whose points were expiring, the lack of support that happened, especially in the early days, that I do criticize them.
Well, when I first booked, I got a 1-bedroom ocean view because at the time that was the only thing available. But I waitlisted for standard, which I did end up getting. So I got over 100 points back on the standard. And I spent the next 2 months dogfighting them to get those points back because they claimed I stayed in an ocean view room, which I did not. So, because they were like, no, these were your points. That was what you did. And I'm like, I didn't. I did not stay in an ocean view room. I stayed in a standard room. And it took me going from person to person to person to person. Like, it took well over a month for me to do it. And I went in January. It is almost April, and I finally got those points back, like maybe last week. And I'm like, I just spent all this time trying to get back 103 points, but I only get 170 per year. So I'm like, that's 100.
But
that's
Sean is also,
if
they're hoping someone is just going to give up, no, not with Sean. Yeah. No, he will come after them.
Right. I'm not going to lose 100 points over that. Like, I was like, this is crazy. And I didn't get to stay in the ocean view room. Like, I might as well just take the ocean view room at that point.
Right, exactly.
So for me, for that to be my welcome home experience, the resort was great. It's as great as it's always been and all that. It's just dealing with member services. I mean, just nobody. Like, even I'm just sitting there giving suggestions as a newcomer, and I'm like, why don't we try it this way or this way? And it's like they're not offering me any suggestion. They're just kind of like, well, it's not in the system, or it's not this. And I'm like, well, can you try this? And then they're like, oh, yeah, we could try that. Like, maybe that's a thing. And I'm like, you're supposed to be the expert on the phone. Like, why am I coming up with the ideas? And I know more about it because I do this, like with you guys. But like for a newcomer, that's my frustration, is that the structure of how things are heavily favors people who know what they're doing. And I think that's
It's a good point. It's a good point.
And I think we were talking about, is this policies or practices? And I think Sean brings up a key point with like practices and member services. I think the common thing we hear, especially since the shutdown of 2020, is the long wait hold times at member services, and just the simple implementing something but like a callback service where you're not having to wait on hold, where they can say, hey, it's going to be a 4-hour wait, type in your number, we'll call you back, which most companies have switched to. Just little things like that, then practice wise could make it go a little smoother.
And this is one of my criticisms. It is really easy to pay lip service to the concept that we love our members and we're here for our members. It's easy to say those words, but they don't mean anything if they're not backed up when the crap hits the fan. And you got a lot, and I like, again, I'm not saying that, you know, that I understand the impact of the year we've lived through, and that they weren't prepared. No one was, and they did their best. But there are things that have continued. Now we're a year into this. It's not new anymore. No one's surprised anymore. But there are still things going on. We talk about these long wait times. Things that can be addressed that they're not addressing. And you can't say we love our members, we care about our members, our member experience is the most important thing to us. And then a year into a pandemic, some of these issues are still here because you simply haven't addressed it and you haven't fixed it. So, Paul, what about you?
Just before I get into my deep rabbit hole topics, to piggyback off of that, a most recent one that we're starting to get a little whisper of is international members. You know, they've felt ignored for the most part through this entire
good point.
Past year. Their situation is much different than ours is. They still can't travel here. And so they've got points that they've lost, that have been banked, borrowed, all this other stuff. And DVC has not given a true written, this is how we're going to handle you. Even as of last week, I was hearing reports of one person calls as an international member, they're about to lose their points. Well, they're going to work with them and they're going to extend their points out another year. Another person calls, nope, you don't apply. So who's making up the policy? Yeah. Like, do they just flip a coin every time someone calls? That goes down my first rabbit hole, which is we've hinted on a little bit.
Let me just interject really quick. This is why I say there is incompetence at the upper echelons of their management. There is incompetence there. And that's a great example of what I'm talking about.
The most frustrating thing with that case is, like, if you're like part of our group and you hear the people talking about the situation, if I just waited on hold for 2 hours and if my call went through to a different person, my story might have been different. That's so frustrating,
Yeah, and we've not, I've tried to identify what the constant is in there, and there is none. And that's the frustrating part, because I would love to be able to tell international.
The constant is the incompetence. That's the one common thread through all these discussions. I'm sorry. Let me just call it out for what it is.
So we've hinted on both of these things, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into both. Sean brought a good point up about, new members struggling with the booking system. I'll take that a step further in that if you don't have a glitch or something wrong with how you book on the online system, kudos to you, because you are the minority. The most recent that we've heard about is resale owners trying to borrow points are getting glitches when they're trying to book. And it's extremely, like Sean was saying, it's extremely unfair because, you jump on, maybe you actually know what you're doing, and you get on there at 8 a.m. to try to book your family's vacation 11 months in advance, and you get through every screen, and then you get the Olaf through his head screen, and you refresh and your room's gone. And so now you've got to call member services, which has a 12-hour wait time, and you'll listen to every song known to man. But this website and the technology they are using needs to be updated, and it would help alleviate some of the things we're complaining about, like long member services wait times, because they're not giving members an opportunity right now.
And there may be, let me just say this. There may be a very legitimate reason why these are happening, but I have to ask the question, why are resale points treated differently in their system than direct points? Why is this a problem for resale owners and not for direct owners? That's what I want to know. Because, again, I go back to the class system. And I've run into this. I have run into, if I need to borrow points for a reservation, I got a call because I'll get through, like as you said, get all the way through the process. Rooms available, points are available, go to book, and there's an error. And again, this has been going on for at least a year and not been fixed. You are not going to tell me there is no fix for this, or that whatever the fix is taking more than a year. This is intentional. This is intentional. And maybe their resale restrictions didn't have the impact they were hoping, so now they're just going to punish resale owners. I don't know. But I want to understand why resale points are treated differently in their system. I understand with Riviera, but that's not the case with any of my contracts, all my contracts, with the exception of one. 175-point contract is direct with them. The rest of my points are resale. And I'm able to use them at other resorts. Why is this a thing? Why are we a year into this? And this still hasn't been fixed. Maybe there's a good reason. I'm open to the fact that there may be. I just haven't heard it yet.
So speaking of intentional, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because this will get crazy. But we posted about this a while back. You can read the article over on DVC Fan. We called it Booking Gate, for lack of a better term. But if you've ever spent the hours on hours to read through all the documents that you've signed, there is a clause based in DVC's agreement that basically allows them the opportunity to predict what booking trends are going to be and remove rooms from inventory to sell as cash. I'm not speaking of breakage. Breakage is a whole other different concept. And again, I'm not going to explain this in a show like this would be very hard, and I would need charts and billboards behind me and all that kind of stuff. But what we noticed ahead of October 1st, 2021, was that rooms were being removed from inventory ahead of the 11-month booking window. So basically, they were being removed before members even had a fair shot to book them. I'm not here to argue whether or not they legally are allowed to do that. That is not my place. I'm not here for that. But what I think, in policy-wise, Disney Vacation Club should do or be made to do is disclose when they take those rooms, disclose when they take rooms out of inventory and how they're taking them away from members. I can tell you that I spoke to an individual who spoke with someone at DVC that confirmed this was occurring, called it a glitch. It's still happening somewhere.
That seems to be their answer. That seems to be their answer for any shady crap they're pulling. Oh, it's a glitch. Well, that glitch has been going on for a year. Okay, it's not a glitch. It's intentional. So let's call it what it is. It's intentional. And I'm not going to go there. I'm not.
So my worst policies at the end of the day are ones that prohibit DVC owners from using the points the way they are meant to be used. And like I said, we could have a much more in-depth conversation and a lot more examples on that. But I think that is the biggest injustice to DVC owners.
And this show has managed to really piss me off. Okay. This show has managed to. I was in such a good mood coming into the show. I'm so pissed off right now. But, it doesn't take much, honestly. Jaded old queen with emotional issues. But, all right. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. We've gone down. I got everybody, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I got everybody. That's going to do it for our show for this week. I hope you're not pissed off. That's not our goal. Well, sometimes it is, but it really isn't. But that's going to do it for our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again next Monday with another edition of the DVC Show. Have a great week, folks.